I guess we can move on to Margaret because we've seen her kind of grow up in the series as well. Margaret, we saw like since she was 10, I think.
Right.
Early on and then even when she was like, tell him I'll do it.
Yes.
So I'm leaning toward a type 3.
Uh-huh.
And I haven't really discussed this with my husband or even thought about it too terribly much, but that's where I'm leaning toward. It would explain her desire to kind of one up. Like she was a little bit more flashy than the queen. And she's like, I could do a better job. She wanted to be admired. The other alternative could have been a type 7. But as she grew older, once she realized that this is my lot in life, that I'm going to be number 2, she wanted meaning in her life and she wanted to serve, which is much more of a heart type than a head type. And so she felt very lost because she wasn't able to do something that was meaningful that gave her her identity or her worth. And that's more of a type 3 struggle versus a type 7 struggle would just be more about contentment. Of course, type 7s want to have worth, but by default, like before we grow up, go on our personal development journey, a type 7 finding the worth is not as important as just not being bored, not being, just being entertained. And so early on, she wanted to be in a role.
Right.
As opposed to just being entertained, like being entitled. Type 7s are probably more of the entitled type in the royal family to take advantage of the entitlement versus taking advantage of a role. It could be entitlement, like I'm entitled to this role. We definitely see that in Margaret. But it's all about a role, an identity, and a status. And so that's why I'm leaning towards type 3. What were some of the things that you...
Oh, with her, boy, I've gone all over the place with her when I was watching that show. Now, have you finished 5? Did you finish?
No, I'm on episode 3.
So I don't want to spoil anything for you, but her life was really about never getting what she wanted. Mm-hmm. She never got what she wanted, ever. And, she didn't get to marry the man she loved. The man she married was not faithful to her. They had a horrible marriage. Mm-hmm. She decides she wants to play a role. She plays the whole Lyndon Johnson thing where she goes and does that, gets him to agree to something or another. I don't remember what it was. So she had a lot of sexual energy about her that she would exude when she was in those roles and stuff like that. And she had kind of a bit of a look at me, here I am. And she seemed to me to be largely discontent as opposed to contented. So I thought of a few different remedies. So row 5 of the periodic table is all about performance. And there's a certain amount of, look at me, here I am. And I think of Palladium, which is kind of right in the middle of the periodic table. And the middle of the table is more confident than the edges of the table. In the middle of the table is more about performance, whereas the edge of the table is more about relationships. I thought about Palladium for her, that they can be really discontented, but they really like to be the center of attention. Mm-hmm. They really do. And
that's interesting.
It's not a very common remedy, but there's just things, like her wounded honor is one of the symptoms for Palladium. Platinum is in there too, which is right below Palladium. And they also have a lot of sexual energy. Samantha in Sex and the City was a Palladium. She was always putting the men down and that kind of thing. Or not Palladium, Platinum. So Margaret could have been one of those 2 remedies.
Did she really put men down?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know that she did, except her husband, the guy that she married. I
wanted really to be supportive of him when they went to New York. I remember that. But he was not happy with her on that trip because she was the center of attention and was not paying attention to him whenever he was ready to go. I remember that.
Yeah. So isn't that interesting how that pops up? It homeopathy. We would definitely look at that.
So here's something interesting. Well, you said sexual energy, and so that made me write down, well, maybe she's a sexual 3. So sexual 3 is an instinct. Every Enneagram type has 3 instinctual variants: self-pres, sexual and social instincts. And so the sexual instinct for a type 3 is very much, it's not like ambitious like the social type 3. Social type 3 is like, I want to be the best and I want everybody to see me as the best. The sexual one is more type 2-ish. It's very much like, I want to help other people win and then I will win. So it's like, if I support other people, then I'm going to get this one-on-one attention. They don't necessarily need the crowd's attention, but if they can get, now if they're not getting one-on-one attention, then they'll take the crowd's attention. And I can definitely see that in Margaret. But sexual 3s want this one-on-one attention, like, I'm going to help you. And in turn, that makes me feel worthy because I'm helping you, and you're going to not necessarily reciprocate like a 2 might want, but give credit to. So I'm going to help you and you're going to give me credit, and then that's going to make me feel worthy and significant. So that's the difference between a sexual 3 and then like just a pure type 2. They look very type 2-ish, but it's definitely a different kind of nuanced motivation.
Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And sexual doesn't necessarily, I had this conversation yesterday in my office hours with my members. Sexual does not necessarily mean sex. Definitely can, but it's more about chemistry on a one-on-one attention level. Like, do we have chemistry? Is this an easy relationship? Like, I'm not having to try so hard. Like, that's what sexual types are looking for. And another way you could interpret it is legacy. Like, I am looking to partner with someone in order to leave a legacy. Because what sex does, sex leaves a legacy of species. It prolongs the species to procreate.
Exactly.
And so, like for other sexual types, maybe sexual 3s, but definitely sexual head types, they want to leave a legacy, an intellectual legacy. Like, here are some ideas and concepts that were really important in my life, and I want to find a partner that's going to join me in perpetuating that idea or that concept after I'm long gone. So if I'm using that as an example, so possibly with a type 3 sexual type, that legacy is more of an emotional legacy. Like, I want people to feel, here's an emotion that feels really important to me, like being on top of the world, for example. That has type 3 vibes. It's not exclusive to type 3s, but if that is an emotion that they value and is very important, they're going to be looking for a partner that's going to support that, so that when they're gone, that emotion lives on as a legacy.
Very interesting. Yeah. I think that fits her, just from what we saw in the show.
Yeah.
At least it fits her character in the show.
That caveat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you have to believe that they tried to get that as close to right as they could, even if they had to do a little, poetic. Is that the word? I don't remember what the phrase is.
Creative license.
That's it. Yes.
And then one other thing that I wanted to mention is kind of a personal story about palladium. My first homeopath that I went to before you, she actually suggested palladium at first. She recanted it after a couple of more of a conversation. But what's interesting is that something that I've recognized, and I don't know if this is because of my upbringing or if it's because of the culture in the United States, but something that I've recognized as I have been trying to move more and more of working with my personality in my business versus against it, is that I do bring a lot of type 3 energy into my business. And I've even had an Enneagram coach ask me if I was a type 3. And that kind of surprised me because I've never tested as a type 3. I've never really seen myself as a type 3. But if I am bringing that energy, that even an Enneagram coach sees it. Of course, Enneagram coaches tend to, be hyper focused on these behaviors.
Right.
But then my homeopath, which would have been in 2017, I think, which would have been before I had my online business. Like, this was one of the ones that, you said it was rare, but I've heard of it before because she suggested it. She just told me to research it. So she said, research this one and tell me what you think. And I was just like, no, that doesn't really sound like me. But, on the surface, I thought that was really interesting how people perceive us versus who we actually are. And that unalignment, that's really what I teach on with my clients and my students. It's like people pick up on energies whether or not you're exuding them or not.
Right. Yes. Yeah. But it probably wouldn't have been a very superficial prescription for you. And that might have worked for a dose. And then it wouldn't have.
And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been given that remedy many times too.
Oh.
Finally, I said, do not give me this remedy. It's
not working.
It's not the right one. It might look like that. But I identify it now after reading your book as a type
4.
Yes.
Yeah. We should talk about that sometime.
Oh, okay. What should we talk about next?